All right. Well, hey there. I am just starting this new recording, doing the top four interviews for the GP that we just had at Vegas, or not Vegas. That was last time. Uh, at Florida, and I'm here with my guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Syrian Seal. Also on the brackets, I was William. A lot of people were confused by that because they don't know my first name. But I'm from North Carolina, and I was the top second Sash player at the GP.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, that last games that you guys had were like picture perfect, down to the wire. Uh, so I gotta commend you, man. That was those were some brilliant games. I got the pleasure of watching myself to see against Pigeon, who was my training partner too. And I remember correctly, your training partner as
Yeah.
well, right? For a while.
Oh yeah, it's people. It's so funny because like I think we've gone back and forth online like constantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, my win record against him is probably like he's at 75%, or maybe at like 25%, maybe 15 if I'm being generous. But I love playing with Pigeon.
He is a good player. If you're gonna lose to anyone in the finals, he's the guy to lose to. I guess.
Oh yeah.
But that's not to take away anything you had. You went. What was your record during the Swiss portion? 6-1?
So during the Swiss, I went 5-2
Five and
because I
two.
I won all my first five ones and I ended up losing my last two.
Got it. Yeah. So we had the same record. I lost mine in the beginning and had a double loss. So it
Oh
was
no.
out of top eight contention immediately. But
Oh.
you got the last two losses. Who were your losses to?
So the first one was to, and I think it's his name on Discord, No Soup for You Too. I think Brian,
Yeah.
the Milliloon.
Mm-hmm.
He got me good. That deck really surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
I was not anticipating it, but the last loss I had, which I think shocked me even more, was the Umir player because like the Umir was dropped, and I was like, I don't even know how to play this matchup. I don't even know what she does. It's like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
oh,
Absolutely. Just adjusting my audio here. I laughed and I peaked everything. So it's sort of how I go. I'm known as the loud mouth around my way. So I agree with you that when I saw the Umir in the top eight, I was like, that's insane. And I'll do his interview a little bit later because he also got top four, which is pretty crazy.
yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about it. So you were playing Sashe for a while. I mean, I remember we were playing each other on the garden ceremonies, right? So you were on Sashe then as well, right?
Yeah, so before that, I'd been playing Tama, and with this one,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this might be kind of a good white L rig to kind of test out and see. So I picked it up. I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, or whenever that set had come out. I just after the pre-release, I picked up my set of all three and
Mm-hmm.
started playing around. I really liked it, so kept going
Yeah,
with it.
I mean it makes sense, right? And it's crazy. And I mean, tell me if I'm right on this. It's crazy how few cards are different from Tama Clear and like Sachet, right? And
Oh
really,
yeah,
those few cards change the entire composition of the deck. It's really not that different, but then it just
no,
feels different when you play it, right?
oh yeah, it's like with Tama, you're kind of like controlling the game and saying like, I'm just gonna keep hitting you until you can't guard. But with
Mm-hmm.
Sash, it's like, okay, I'm gonna build a wall and just make sure you can't hit me for the next couple turns.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about how you even got onto Sash, right? So you said you were on Tama for a while, and then you went over to Sash. What brought you to these white Elrics? What brought you to like where you started out with like, this is where I want to be at.
So honestly, it's the I only have white SRs, and so I just started continuing with that. Because Tama was the first deck I had like built and
Yeah.
played. And then I kind of branched out a little bit in between that, like trying Mel
Mm-hmm.
when that came out, and I did try Remember as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tried the Adams build with that, but I wasn't a huge fan of Adams.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, White's really strong right now.
Couldn't
So
agree
I
more.
mean,
Couldn't agree more. I do think at the GP I remember even talking with Pigeon and saying like it was like a couple weeks before he was on two Exias and I was like, I know you don't want to play a white L rig, but if you're not gonna play the white L rig, then you need to be at least on three Exias. And I think four Exias felt amazing at that
Oh
at the
yeah.
GP. But I can't remember. I gotta look at your list real quick. Did you run any Exias?
So I run three
Uh-huh.
in this list, and honestly, I don't know. It's like it's crazy because like I feel like four would feel so good, like you said, like just having that, especially in games against like Pyraluke
Mm-hmm.
and anything similar to Sash that auto triggers
Mm-hmm.
the target. But I just like I was having such a hard time like deciding what I could take out, what I shouldn't take out, and that kind of thing. So three
Yeah.
kind of felt like just enough, but like I wasn't substituting anything else for it.
Yeah, and this is actually a great transition. Let's talk about some of these some deck choices that you've got in here. Which let's just start with the Elric deck, right? Like, so you've got a Madoka Float and Dub. So you decided to go with the Madoka instead of the Umer Clear, which a lot of people were running prior to that. And then the Sashe, or sorry, the Machina Wing Slash as well as Machina Repair. I think the Machina Repair is probably the best choice because you just fill out your cloth and still punish them for not being able to attack you.
Oh yeah.
And I think you probably need the enter in this type of deck. That three enter can get costly. That three enter activation on Sashay. But you decided to go for the dub. You wanted 2/1 stops, really is what it is. I mean, get the one cloth activation and then the Madoka dub as just stopping one. How come you decided on the one stop instead of like a three stop, which was kind of popular in terms of Madoka prior to this GP?
Yeah, so I think like with the three stop, I mean, it just costs so much. And like I will say too, a lot of my matchups that I had prior to the GP was against like Pyraluke
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of discard online.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think for me, like I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to pay for it. But also because of like, the three costs and other things in the deck, like I want to make sure I can play the over pursuits and
Yeah.
do the pay one for flashcards and whatnot. Like I had to kind of constrict my enter a little bit and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that, what I wanted to pay for made sense. So I didn't want to have to get stuck with like, one enter, not be able to pay the two to actually stop a lane and then discard and so on.
Yeah, I honestly think you and I are in the same boat here too. I asked you like that question, but I think I was in the same boat. I really felt like we needed to constrict our enter, especially because with all
Yeah.
the Anj that I thought we were going to run into,
Yeah.
that it was like very necessary. In almost like all of my decks where I was running Clap, I ended up switching over to Dub just because the draw one gets you just enough wiggle room to find the guard too, and you need to find the guards pretty early in this meta, I think.
Oh yeah. I think too, one other reason that I love it is like it with the repair, there are times when I don't feel like I want to play it like immediately when I hit level two or level three.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to dub like turn two
Mm-hmm.
like gives you that +1 too. So then you can feel free to do like your 3/2/2 and not have
Yeah.
to worry about like the over pursuit and things like that too.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the guessing game is kind of actually important too. I remember in the one of the tournaments I was in, I was up playing against the Sashe deck, and they really held off on the Machina Repair, and that
Hmm.
ended up putting them in a situation where I genuinely thought they were on binds, the three
Oh
three
yeah.
enter, stop at three attacks kind of thing, or two attacks kind of thing. And so I played differently than I should have, and I lost the round for it from it.
Ah,
Inevitably, was able to come back with it and then be like, I remember what this is now. It's not. It's gonna be a repair. So I use that to my advantage in the round too. But it does. The mind games exist when you have also Smash, right? Like Smash is the most
yeah.
like Machina assist. So it makes sense to leave it there and just sort of be like a questionable thing.
Oh yeah.
Let me ask you this: with two zero cost level twos in your assists, was there any games where you thought it was just valuable to do both of them really early and then put a 3-3-2 field out?
I think in some matches there were a couple times. I know one specifically is if someone has like pushed the super Halesta Saber or
Mm-hmm.
not Halesta Saber, sorry, Ultra Superheroes,
Mm-hmm.
and like I know I'm on the precipice of milling, I'm gonna repair that way. Whenever I do mill the next turn, it's gonna be a non-burst. That
Mm-hmm.
way, hopefully anything after that will be a burst. Um, So I think that's really one of the only times that I was feeling like kind of stressed about it.
Hmm.
There were a couple Ange games where they were putting in that early damage, and I was like, I don't feel good about this. Let's just go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid and
Hmm.
keep moving forward with it.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense too. The 3-3-2 field against Ange can specifically help against like their things that bounce level ones.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It feels really good to do a double remember against an Ange too.
yeah, that as well is pretty strong. So I mean, I think the rest of this Elrig deck is pretty standard here. You got your Super Celestia Saber and your Ultra Superheroes. Do you have anything that you wanted to say about those things before we move on?
Oh no, I think Ultra Superheroes is, I mean, it's strong. It's
It's just
it's
strong.
good.
Yeah, it's like what do you compare it to, right? Like it does the mill functionality and the get you out of jail free card when it comes to being against discard. Um, but then yeah, you've packed the deck up with a lot of good card choices outside of that. Um, you've got your standard stuff, your over pursuits, and I'm just saying this mostly for the I know you know. I
Okay.
say this mostly for the audience's benefits. You've got these over pursuits which have been overperforming for this entire meta. But you've got and you've got remembers as well as the three Exias, which you explained. Strong top end white white Signy choices here. But you've got some interesting choices here, and I want to ask you some more specific questions about those. Tokiyuki, you've got as a two of,
Mhm.
and then you've got to level out your level ones. You've got Lepus as two of as well, but Driver's Ed as a full set of four. Do you want to talk about your level ones sort of plans that you've had with
Yeah.
that?
So it's actually funny because this has been a long it's the my favorite conversation to have with other white players
Yeah.
is driver's ed, Zhao Yun, Tokiyuki, what do you put them at? Like what's the number? So with these, like the driver's eds, what I found in a lot of my games is I guess you could kind of say it's a little bit of mind games, but it's also just trying to keep them off from early damage. And right now with like Machina and Urith kind of being like the two big ones that you see like turn one, flip it, do
Absolutely.
damage, mill or
Yeah.
whatever. Driver's ed, it it's kind of fun because it's very annoying for the opponent, but it's also good just to keep them off of it. And then what I found is there are some times like when I'm on turn two, or let's say if I go first and I go turn three, and I fill up the board with like a Phalaris and I've already ultra superheroed, they can't Urith because they don't want to Urith and lose the mill and not be able to target a level one. So then they're like, oh, well, what do I do here? So it's definitely helped me kind of push a little bit further and not take initial damage that I normally would do.
Hmm.
And so I felt like four of just trying to get it as fast as possible and filling the board with two of them, turn one, and just moving on and recurring it with Machina, Wing Slash. It was just kind of it was a fun thing to kind of toss in there.
Yeah, I think so too.
Um,
I think what you're describing there is like some early game tempo advantage.
oh
You
yeah,
just it's not a forever solution, but it's an immediate solution to make sure you don't immediately get run over. Um, and I think that's good too. I think that's literally how white players should be playing their level ones right now. When I was playing my level ones with Nova, the idea was wall out for the entire game, kind of thing. I just don't think that's that possible nowadays. So
oh yeah.
if you're able to buy yourself a turn of damage prevention, that's good enough. Call your wins there.
Yeah, I think like Tokiyuki's, I did want to keep running them because like I think it's still pretty good against like red and like the black too, like with Orgona and stuff. I think like if I were to swap that out, I'd probably run Zhao Yun instead of Tokiyuki,
Yeah.
just because I still think Zhao Yun is very strong against most things. Um,
I was
and
running
then
a playset of Zhao Yun's until like 2 days before the GP, and I swapped to
yeah,
three. But that was my level one of choice.
oh yeah, I think it's like I think Zhao Yuns are so good. It's just like at least in the matchups I had, I was just like, man, I wish this was a driver's ed so bad right
Yeah, yeah,
now.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I'll tell you another thing that we both had as a Remember Deca and your Sashe was Amoeba.
Oh yeah.
Amoeba as a level one, just coming in there pretty clutch. How did that help you out?
It helped out in a couple of circumstances. Like I think during GP, I'm trying to think of like the times when it really. popped up was probably, I think, against the Milliloon and against Pigeon. I think there's like a couple times it procced and I was able to draw another card. Nothing that like saved me the game necessarily. But I mean, with Sash and needing to discard to bring out Full Moon and stuff, it can be a big advantage just to have an extra card in
I don't know.
hand.
I think I
Even
remember one of your games, either it was with Pigeon or someone else. I can't remember where I was watching. You amoeba'd. You left Amoeba till the very end, and you had one card left in your deck, so that way you could purposely refresh yourself.
Oh yeah, I did
And
do that.
and then you drew the guard off of it because you refreshed.
Yeah, I did remember that. That was, I think that was against Pigeon because I think, unfortunately, whenever that, I'm excited for the recording to come out because
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
I know it's gonna be like a minute of me just sitting there thinking of like, do I draw or do I not? Like trying to decide it. Um, but yeah, I mean, that definitely did help there. And then, of course, I did take the damage from it with the refresh. But
Mhm.
I mean, grabbing a guard off of it's definitely not a bad thing.
I mean, so I think you made the right choice. I mean, yes, you had to take the extra damage, but on the flip end, drawing a single card and then refreshing on your following turn is like a death sentence against
Yeah.
Madoka. I mean, literally, you're out of options. Like, okay, cool, you might as well just not be playing the game. You put down your one card and then you call it a day. You know,
Yeah.
I think that was an incredibly smart decision. Moving on a little bit into some more stuff, I think it is important. This is the first time I'm ever going to say this out loud on the podcast, but it's probably important to have level twos nowadays.
Oh yeah.
I have been, excuse my French, shitting on level twos for this entire game. But outside of the flashcards, which helps you push aggro, you decided to go for some Ishikiri Marus. That's a pet card of mine. I love that one. What's the
Oh
thought
yeah.
process behind that one?
Honestly, for that, I was just thinking like with the burst, like if it wasn't gonna be Ishikiri, it was gonna be Lynx.
Mm-hmm.
And because I always switch between those two. With Ishikiri, I really like being able to check top three and put something on the field. Closing up a hole at any point is really good. Um, I do also like building a wall and then also checking top of deck has helped me in some circumstances with like the amoebas and stuff. But
I completely agree with you on that front. Like it is in this basically what I found in my testing for this format was not having a guard on turn one or turn two is like a death sentence, but
oh yeah,
also you need to get those last guards that you have, and just filtering helps you get there. And it's like there's not a lot of like, oh, big filter, let me check. I'm miracle draw with exceed, right? You don't really have the time to
yeah.
do that. So you have to do a lot of little filters to get you there. And Shikirimaru is one of those little filters.
Oh yeah, the one play I haven't gotten to do yet, but I'm waiting on is the Ishikiri burst into an Aresh. I know sooner or later it'll happen. I've been waiting. Gotten close, but not yet.
Yeah. And, let's talk about it. Yeah, the Aresh is the next card on the list to talk about. You rank 2 Aresh, Gagol. It is a meme, but surprisingly real in this deck, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Um, it's funny because like it can on one part like it could be a death sentence because we don't pay it at the right time. Like you're just goodbye
Mm-hmm.
life cloth, like just hit me, I guess. But with Sash, like in a spot where you're able to really calculate, so like if you do Aresh and Full Moon one turn,
Yeah.
let's say you have like 3 cloth, you go down to 1 cloth and you have a guard in hand. I mean, with Full Moon, you can say, okay, well, I can take 1 Signy damage and then just guard if I really need to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Sash like makes it playable, which is like really funny, but I love it.
Have you ever gotten to the niche corner case? Because you played this deck more than I have. Have you gotten to this niche corner case yet, where you've like you've got like an Exia on the field and you can't play into it because Sash triggers the Exia with its
Yeah.
with its white enter abilities, but you've only got one lane to fill, so you like play this Mew or this Phalaris that you have instead. And you're like, no triggers happen. I didn't play a white Signy.
Oh yeah, that has happened many times. Me and one player, Emmy, who I think is on like a couple servers here.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big Pure Luke head, and like we just go back and forth with like, all right, I'm gonna double Exia because Pure Luke triggers, and then he's like, well, I'm gonna double Exia. Now what? We're just like, what do we do?
Yeah, the infamous Exia dance, as we've been
Yeah.
calling it on the podcast, where you both just play an Exia and you're kind of like smoking barrels to see who can get the trigger. But I mean, you've got your Exia solve here. I saw it earlier. Yeah, three Yuki. I think that's the right number. With everyone wanting to play 4 Exia, that means the Yuki count should also go up.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you've got okay. You got the Aresh. It's a real card here. The one of Mew is not something I've seen in most Sashe decks. Can you talk about that one?
Yes. So I actually kind of got this idea from a couple JP decks I had been like kind of looking at like months before, kind of just seeing how other people have built out Sash before. And prior to this build, I was running a very spell heavy. I was very excited to use Darkness 7 when that came out. And so what I had before was I was running like 4 over pursuits. I think it was instead of Lepus, I was running 2 Darkness 7s. And then in the Mew spot, I had a modem. And the idea for that was like, late game, if I have a Halesta Saber open and Miyu or something's in trash and I just need to clear that extra lane, you can Halesta Saber, grab it, drop it on the field, tuck stuff underneath it, and kind of move on from there. That at first with the modem, it kind of worked, but like I didn't really like Darkness 7, so we kind of shifted into this Miyu play, and up the level 1s for that reason. But I mean, Miyu was really good. My favorite thing about it is being able to grab a Yuki for 1 inner if I really need to. It can be good against the Exia.
yeah. I cannot stress that even on on my remember control list, how strong Mew was. Like I knew it was good, but I didn't expect it to be this good. Outside of just being able to get you like a level 1 that you might need, which another one shoutouts that I grabbed quite often was Amoeba. Because Amoeba was just like, if I had a guard in my hand and I was up against a discard opponent, paying the 1 enter to get myself an Amoeba allowed me to protect my hand, protect that guard a little bit more.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Surprisingly relevant, and I mean, when you're up against those discard decks, like paying 1 enter to get yourself literally just a card to keep your hand afloat, right, is actually pretty strong on its own too.
Yeah, I think too. Like, I don't know. I think it was just like for free games whenever like me and Pigeon were practicing before GP. There was a couple times when like Miyu would come up and I would just like last turn, he's out of resources. I'm like, how do I do this? Miyu comes in, I have 2 level 1s in hand. I'm like, all right, this is how we're gonna do it. We're just gonna open the lane and hope we do it.
do it the old hard-fashioned way, the way that Takaratomi intended. Yeah, I mean that's the deck. I mean, clearly you really value Remember. That's your. I think, is it your only 4 of? No. Outside of Driver's Ed and Guard, it is your only 4 of outside of that. So you really wanted to tax your opponents then. That was the goal.
Oh yeah, I like there was a time before GP where I was kind of unsure about Remember, because like when I think of Remember, I think of Tama, I think of the 2 attack, paying the guard. I was like, I don't know if it's really that good. But then like talking to like friends like P. Smith and Emmy, and then they're like, I don't know, they're like, I think because like you're gonna tax them to attack with Signy, you may as well just keep taxing them to do other things while you're at it. And I was like, maybe you're right. So bumped it up before, and it definitely helped a lot during the GP.
Yeah, I mean, I think Remember has all the things that you need to. Taxing itself is not beneficial unless it is usable, right? And so. I know some people overdo it sometimes on the Sashe attacks, where they do Remembers, but they also do Penlights, and they also do some other stuff. I gotta agree with you there. I think that it's like, Remember gives you enough utility that it's worth it with the tax, whereas these other things are able to interact with, and they don't really get effective tax all that much.
Oh yeah, and I think too, like, Sash will always trigger. So like, what I did in a lot of games is if I know there's a level 1 on their board and they have an Exia, I'm gonna drop the Remember right in front of the level 1. They're going to block that lane. I'm going to down it, see what my next cloth is, and then decide if I want to Machina repair or just let them punch into a bouncing life burst.
That is a thing. I have, without fail, pretty much 90% of the time, played my Machina repair and then went, crap, and then put my Remember out and looked at the card I just repaired.
Oh, I love doing that. I'm like, what did I just put down in that little spot there? Oh, yes, driver's.
Yeah. That's the reminder. So, all right, we've covered over pretty much your deck. I do have a couple sort of advanced Sashe questions to ask you, and if you have an answer for them, and then if you've got some other tips that you can bestow upon us from what you've done with Sashe. You've said already that you, generally speaking, like to dub before you do your Machina repair. What turn do you like to Machina repair, generally speaking?
So it really depends for me. So in a lot of games, let's see, with repair specifically, I think it really just depends on where your life cloth is kind of at. Because it's the same. I think that's kind of what Sash is. It's a lot of figuring out when you want to once a game, when you want a full moon, when you want to repair, and like kind of moving on from there. So like with me, I don't really like to repair the turn I go turn three, unless I'm gonna get hit with a refresh or something like that. I'm like, let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. Usually, if I can hold on to it, or if I know, I have Remember out, I know my next burst is going to stop damage. Typically, it's going to happen around my, fourth turn, like turn after I go turn or level 3, just to get that extra +1 if I really need it. But yeah, I think kind of keeping it like as long as you can really helps. And then one thing that I did a couple times, it didn't come up at GP at all. Honestly, Aresh wasn't as helpful as I was hoping she would be in GP, but one thing I really like is if you have Remember down, check the top cloth. If it's not going to be a life burst, repair, put down some other card, and just go ahead and Aresh if you can get lethal out of it, because you're not going to waste the life cloth. That at least negates one of those being a cloth, and it's a little bit safer. Not safe, but a little bit safer.
Yeah. No, it's actually kind of interesting. You're really the first person I've ever talked to in these interviews which talks about their life cloth as a resource specifically.
Yeah.
For most people, it's an HP bar. Most people, when they talk about the resources, they're talking about their enter, and like green decks, using your enter as a toolbox, or black decks using their trash as a toolbox, or your even green, like black decks knowing that after you refresh, your enter becomes the toolbox that becomes into your trash. You're really the first person to talk often about knowing what's in your life cloth and using that to your advantage, which I find super, super, super interesting. I wonder how you'll take it for the next set when we get what do you call it? When we get Eldora, since that lets you look at your life cloth and abuse your life cloth.
I've already been practicing like Yuki and trying some different new builds with that to see how that Eldora does. It's gonna be interesting to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I have another question for you, and this has got to do with Sashe and her once per game, as well as full moon. I assume you pick full moon 90% of the time, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. This seems like the right move. Is there any situation where you're like, no, I want to pick, and that's how bad I don't know this card is Saturn.
Yeah. It's so small. I've played a couple different like decks before GP, and even like in Mean Pigeons practicing, I like just asked him, I was like, what do you think? I was like, do you think Saturn needs to come out at all? Like, is there any matchup? And I think I played his Remember build, and he was like, I think Remember might be the only time you would want to pull it out. But like other than that, like 9 times out of 10 you want the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just because like I think in that moment, like when you do full moon, you're like, okay, I'm taking 2 damage max. Like they can't. I mean, I guess I should say max, unless there is entwined and other things. But typically, you're only going to take 2 damage.
Yeah.
So it's like nice to know that, and then with full moon, using the once a turn, making it a 14k, and saying like, okay, cool. This has everything else is Shadow Signy. Focus on this and see if you can get around it. It's so good. It's so good.
It's difficult. When I was playing as Remember, my round 6 was against a Sashe player, and I barely edged it out. But we had 3 turns where we had 0 life cloth. Both of us just had 0 life cloth, and full moon was on the field for 2 of those turns.
Yeah.
Because just a 14k make everything else shadow is just really annoying to deal with.
Yeah.
All right. So then the question then comes as to when do you feel is appropriate to use full moon? When do you feel it's appropriate to use your once per game? Is it a sort of like 90% of the time I do it this turn and this turn, or is it a flexible thing?
So I would say typically like if you it does depend. I think if your opponent, let's see, if your opponent goes first and they go to level 3 first,
Hmm.
typically I will once a game the moment I hit level 3, especially if you're going against Remember, because I mean they're gonna blink your Elrig anyway. May as well just get it out of the way.
Totally.
Um, but it really depends. There are some games I've had where with using Dub, Ishikiri, Driver's Ed, I'm able to kind of like stall out a good bit of damage. And sometimes I'll maybe wait a little bit until I hit about maybe 4 life cloth, maybe 3 is when I'm like, okay, if we have it once a game, we got to do it now. Make sure we're like, zoned in so we can just try and keep going. Um, but typically I think in most of my games I ended up doing it turn 3 and then immediately the turn after I full moon usually.
Yeah,
There was
I don't think there's a lot of games, especially at the GP, that are going past turn 5, right? So
yeah.
like you've got to get it in there while you can.
I was gonna say I think there was one game I had where I did full moon before I did the once a game, and I think it was because I was going against, I want to say it was Anj,
Hmm.
and I was like they're gonna multi attack, and I was like what I need to do is just full moon first. That way if they open a lane, whatever, they're not opening multiple lanes.
Hmm.
And then once they use that enter, then the next turn I was like, all right, now we once a game and tax you for those other attacks.
Got it. Yeah, that all makes sense to me. I think that's a pretty good tips for anyone who's trying to figure out how to master Sashe, which is, I mean,
Okay.
it's a difficult deck. Like it's got, it is. I have publicly stated that I think Sashe is the weirdest deck in Wecross right now,
It is.
because it is like turns 1 and 2 an aggro deck, and then turns like 3 and 4 it's like a real on control stall deck, and then like turn 5 and 6 it's like back to being a mid range deck. Like it's just a very strange deck, right?
Oh yeah. It was like I have said this multiple times and I'll continue saying it. I think if you're playing a white center, I still think Remember's better. I wholeheartedly believe Remember is the right choice, but I think Sash is just so much fun
Yeah.
and there's a lot of flexibility there with it that it's kind of fun to pilot and try and, figure out.
I mean, man, you got it to second place at the
I know.
GP. It's still a pretty good result, I think.
It was funny, like, because that was my first time. Like, I didn't go to Vegas, unfortunately,
Hmm.
or anything like that. And I was like, I kept telling everyone we travel with, the North Carolina crew, I was like, I really hope I can get 16th, like 16, top 16. I want that play mat, like, wherever we get. And then, like, at the end of it, I was like, yep, of course, it's gonna come down to me and Pigeon. Here we go. Let's do it.
That's how it goes, man. In all seriousness, with the way that I found WeCross to go is you really dedicate yourself to getting better, getting good. Consistency is really important. Once you get to that level, you can almost guarantee that you can make that top 16. But where the
Oh,
chips land as to do you make it to top 8? Are you matched against the appropriate person in top 8 to keep moving forward? That's all, roulette. Who knows?
oh yeah.
But you navigated it well. I mean, and let's talk about some of that navigation. So, um, was rounds 1 through 7. I know they're a haze as you just chug through them. Was there any rounds that stood out to you in 1 through 7 that you were like, I learned a lot here, or this was a tough one, or this was an easy one? Anything that you got for that kind of thing?
I definitely think like one game in particular that does kind of like pop in my head is, well, not only the Melanin one, because like I that one turn, I basically had lethal on board, but I didn't sash once a turn, and because of that, he just pomegranated it, and like I was like, I am so stupid. I just needed to pump it up to a 14. I was
Just
like, why did
seeing,
I?
yeah. Sometimes you get
So
that
that,
situation too where you go, attack phase. Wait, oh no, I'm
yeah.
gonna die now.
Yeah, and I'm excited too because it was one of the ones on table one, so I can't I can't wait to rewatch it and be like, no.
Yeah.
But I think the other one was like Anj. I don't know, Anj is kind of a weird one because like I feel like I know Anja's strong.
Hmm.
Like I see it, I'm like, that's a good deck. But like Sash, like I feel like my games against Anja have been pretty good, like in most of the matchups I've had. And I mean, I know before we got to top eight, I played Starfruit's Anj, and I mean, it was a grind game. It
Hmm.
it was just holding out, hoping, waiting until I think he refreshed, and I knew he didn't have a guard to like just go for it. But that match, it definitely was like, okay, in some of these matches, you're gonna have to wall up and just like just keep praying and holding out and see what happens.
Yeah, what I found was so I was on Orange as well for the GP until about 2 weeks before I swapped off
Mhm.
to remember. I haven't. That's my biggest regret is that I didn't have just enough, just another week of remember practice in me, and I think I would have done a little bit better. But the reason I swapped off with Anj, just like you said, is it's really hard to get guards in that deck. The
Yeah,
consistency of getting guards is very low, which means that in a if you do manage to get this game to last a little longer than turn 5, let's say, you have a real chance at winning because they have taken a fair amount of Elrig damage, so they're worn down at that point.
oh
Um,
yeah. I think
that's at least
that
what I found.
Oh yeah, I think and like our top in our top games against like when I played a Starfruit again in top eight,
Hmm.
that was one thing that came up where I can't remember. I honestly do not know virtuals at all because I didn't buy a box and I don't know any of their names. But the one that could recur a guard is like just a like it's like you pay one, grab a
Kokoro.
guard. Yeah, like I kept trying to. I was like, okay, I just need to stall him out. We'll see how this goes. And he kept being like, all right, grabbing a guard, and I was like, dang it. I was like, how do I make him stop getting guards? I was like,
Yeah,
it's too good.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly that. Um, yeah, Kokoro ended up being one of the cards that I had in my version before I gave up the deck, as well as honestly Haniels, because I was just like, I just
yeah.
need early guards, and this is one of the best ways to get there. But yeah, so it's you did inevitably. Let's go to top four, top eight, I should say. You made it all the way to the finals. Um, your first round was against Starfruit again. Now, did you say that you beat Starfruit in these rounds 1 through 7?
Yes. So I played, I think it was my round five game was against him.
Mm-hmm.
And then that knocked me up to the first table against the Milliloon, and that began my downfall. At least in the Swiss rounds of lost that one and then lost the Umir game, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you ended up playing against him again, um,
Yeah.
and I assume the round went sort of similar. Did you learn things from the round one that you then took into finals that was helping you secure that win?
Not necessarily. I think the main thing was again the stall game. I think what ended up, and if I believe if I'm remembering correctly, what ended up winning it for me was I had again two remembers, downed them both, and he only had one inner. So it was just kind of like that point of like, all we're gonna do is just kind of stall it out and then go for the Elric damage and just hope you can't guard. Like, because I know you're able to get that guard, but if I can just do it this way, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, if you can't pay for that
Um,
card, then that card's useless.
Yeah, and so I think that was what got that game. But no, I mean it was definitely a tough matchup. It was not it was not easy in the slightest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but you did clinch it, man. So you got yourself up to top four. Who did you play in top four?
So that was a rematch against the Millilan again.
Yeah, so you got yourself a lot of grudge matches at the top there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went
Oh
against
man.
Milliloon, which you lost the first time around. How did this one change?
So I think Remember was kind of what helped me kind of push in.
Hmm.
I believe Remember helped in both of those matches in top eight, just to again tax for the guard, and they couldn't. Um, but one thing too was like the whole time I was sitting there, I was like, all right, Hanyo Pomegranate, vanish 12k or less, discard for 8k or less. Don't make the same mistake. You can do this.
That
Oh, but
does.
it was a really good game. I think like all of those games were so tough. Like it was, I didn't expect to make it that far, and then then playing those, I was just like we're in Florida, it's muggy, my hands are sweaty. I'm like trying to dry them off and keep playing. It's not working. It's
I
just
can guarantee you. I was watching those games. everyone's hands were shaking during that one.
Yeah.
Ages you, man. Like those were like fight for your life games that everyone was playing. Um,
Yeah.
so all right, well you managed to pull it off against it, which is impressive, right? Because I haven't seen the Milliloon deck list, but I feel like it probably had a fair amount of discard in it, right?
Oh yeah, there was a good bit. And I mean that really like discard is the one thing I was worried about going into GP. Um, I mean, I most of my practice, ironically, has been against Pure Luke, which is discard, and then the Madoka, which is also discard. So I do have good practice against it. Um, but there are just some times where I don't have a hand, and I'm like, I don't know how to get out of this, unfortunately.
That
Um,
is sort of what discard is looking to do.
yeah,
Milliloon does discard to try to get that disruption early. So if you can hold it off even just a little bit, right? Well, you have the tools too, right? You've got the Super Celestia Saber and the Ultra Superhero, so you could refill your hand at least to field. So
yeah,
that I'm certain helps. It's harder against your finals match, a deck like Madoka, which is like, no, I can keep your hand at 0 the entire game, you know? So let's talk about that last round. Unfortunately, you lost it, but what tools did you employ to keep yourself going longer? Because it was, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, and you guys will be able to see it on Hellfire's channel, which is Fire Pit TCGs. Um, you did an amazing job keeping that game going, even past the point where it felt like you should have discarded out already.
yeah.
So
Like
what was your tips and tricks there?
I think against Madoka, I mean, really, it's just pray to God you get an amoeba and just hold on to it. If you get any burst, pray it's an Ishikiri Maru or something that'll draw you. It was stressful. One thing I was really at one point, and I don't know if you're even able to see my hand in that replay, but at one point I was really fighting to decide if I wanted to keep Arash, if it would even be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in that there's like two one stops smash in the Yuka Yuka.
Yep.
So I was just looking for ways to try and clear lanes and get him down. But I mean, discard, it's real. And then when he was at, I think he ended at maybe at like 2 or 3 cloth. It was a grind game. It was tough.
Yeah. I remember looking at that last game and seeing like, all right, I think the writing might be on the wall. I think Pigeon has a clear advantage, but you had I think 2 or 3 life cloth left, and
Mhm.
Pigeon went for the attacks on the field and paid all the enter for it. And I went,
Yeah.
all right, here, this is it. If that any of those, like if any of those is a burst, I think it might have swung way back in your favor again.
Oh
Because
yeah.
it was just an unsafe move. I mean, I think he had to make it because he had to get the race advantage in that scenario, but whew, it was nail biting.
Yeah, I definitely know too. I've definitely realized Pigeon, whenever like you refresh, like he knows what's in your cloth. He's able to like track it. And like I think at that point, like he probably knew like it's not gonna be an Exia, it's not gonna be a Remember. But like yeah, it's a tough match. It's I think against discard, and I hate saying this about a deck because
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
well, I feel like you never want to rely on your burst to like win you a game, but like against discard, I think you really have to.
Yeah.
Like it, especially in like a deck like Sash, because once you don't have cards to discard, like how are you going to pull out your full moon without paying your enter? And if you can't pay your enter, how are you going to bounce something? And
Mm-hmm.
it gets a little dicey. It gets a little dicey there.
Yeah, it's like a little tower of cards that you make.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have the base, how does it work? But sometimes that's actually still a valid answer, right? So for example, when I was doing the Esper control, remember control, I became very very much situated on if I don't hit a life burst on my first, second, or third one against the aggro deck, specifically the virtual decks, I just lose the game. There is no way to win that game. I will always lose that game. However, if I get a life burst on the first or second one, very commanding position to win that game. But you can do the percentages here, right? You can look at that and say, all right, well, it's a 50-50 on the first one, and then it's about I think it's like a 73% chance on the third one, and then it's like a 90 or an 85% chance on the third one. So you can say like, well, look, that percentage is still quite there in my favor in this matchup.
Yeah.
It's not completely over. I can count on my bursts a little bit. I put them there for a reason, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Um, well, so okay, here comes the tough question. This is usually the last question of the interview, which is if you would change anything on this moving forward, what do you think you would change?
Oh, that has been the question. Not only for this, but I mean with the color rule, assuming
There's
that's
a
going to
lot
happen.
happening soon, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I have no idea. Before GP, one thing I tried, I've seen a lot of JP decks running Miko Miko, the assist line, which is interesting. And like it drives me nuts because like on paper, Miko Miko is such a good assist for Sash. Because you
Yeah.
think about it, and it's like, okay, like I get discarded, I draw five, discard, two or three, whatever. And then the level two, you pay three, bottom deck something on attack phase, which is like that's the price that you would pay for Sasha's like once a turn. So it's like you're basically doing it on their attack phase and you can get rid of an Exia no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, every time I played it, I was like, if only this was Madoka, we would be in such a better spot here. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't it's tough. I really don't know what I would swap out. I feel like every piece is pretty well like ratioed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe with color restrictions, maybe we'll try out a couple little things and see how we like it. But I think for now I'm probably gonna keep it how
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
is, I guess.
I mean, it
But I
served
don't,
you
I
well.
don't really
There's
want to
there's
do.
no reason to change a machine that's working well.
Yeah.
Um, Going into Daytona, are you looking forward for any changes to like center L rig there? Are you still gonna be still on the Sash train, or you think you're gonna give some of these other L rigs a try?
I think what I might do is keep the Sash like kind of where it's at, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I am interested to try like the Yuki
Mm-hmm.
Elrig, and I know in P13, which like I don't think it's gonna be good, but I still want to try Mayu. I think it'll be kind of goofy and fun to kind of give it a go, see what
Why not?
happens.
Why
But
not? Why not?
yeah,
And I mean, if you want to
but
play, if
you
you want
know,
to play Miko Miko that badly, you've got this new
yeah.
center coming out that'll do the job for you. Who needs an assist line if you just use her as a center?
Oh yeah. Oh well, I guess I will say one thing. I mean, one thing I'm tempted to maybe try out is an Eldora assist for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, those assists are nuts. I mean, and looking at let's say like the Madoka dub, what is it? The Eldora, I think it's stage, the one that gives your next two cloth life burst.
yeah.
I mean, it's in some cases it's technically a better dub because one, you're going to be able to down something, so if there's two
Mm-hmm.
lanes open,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to down one, and the next burst you get, just draw two, which is like better than drawing one. So I don't know, I'll be intrigued to kind of play with that one a little bit, but
I have a feeling that I'm on the same boat with you. I will be playing a
yeah.
lot around with that one as well. Well, man, it was really great talking to you. It was really great playing you prior to this GP and getting used to Sashe actually from your hands. That gave me a lot of experience as to what I wanted to do with my deck at the GP, and then to see you get all the way up to second, man, that was a glorious run. You really should be
Yeah.
proud of yourself, dude.
Thank you.
Any shout outs you want to do before we go? It could be your socials, it could be your locals, it could be anything you want here.
Yeah, I am on Twitter. Fox_Tay is my name. I posted a lot of pictures on GP and was like, no one's gonna know who I am because it's not Syrian Seal on my Twitter. But I do want to do a couple of shout outs. Huge shout out to the North Carolina crew. I mean, Alice, P. Smith, Lune, we have Emmy, we have Bazumi, all of them. They're so good. They helped me get into WeCross about a year ago, and they've been super friendly. Definitely helped kind of amp up the love that I have for this card game now. So big shout out to them, the Virginia crew, Matt Chops, all of them, all tiers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's just so many people. Pigeon, big shout out, congratulations. We ran it back last night, and I will continue to ask him to run it back. So other than that, I mean, I just thanks to everyone who came to GP and made it so great.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. It was great talking to you, and I hope to see you at the third GP whenever they decide to announce that one.
I will be there.
All right,
I will
see
be
you later,
there.
everybody.